voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
Do you think that his vision is realized in what we still see on the streets of so many cities, these protests after the murder of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter memorials popping up around this country in New York City and Washington? And does it make his mission, does it make this election more urgent to you?
Well, of course, this election is urgent for many reasons, but what we're talking about here is our democracy. And what John Lewis was always about was a more perfect union, about bringing people together. So, yes, this is a continuation of his values to see these young people out on the street. He knew that his work was not done, that more needed to be done. And that's why I was so happy that he went. The last thing he did, action he took when he left Washington, D.C. several weeks ago, he left the hospital, he went to Black Lives Matter Plaza, met the mayor of Washington there, and then his picture is there looking to the future. There he is, John Lewis, standing on the Black Lives Matter tapestry. It was a connection from when he was here speaking in 1963 at the March on Washington, and then passing the torch on to the future.
I want to ask you about this standoff, really, with the White House and with Republicans over unemployment help for so many Americans who are still out of work, with really no sign of that changing anytime soon as the pandemic is spiking in most parts of this country. How is that going? And people are really scared. Can you reassure them?
You know, people are very scared. I said John's loss was like a death in our family. Well, nearly 150,000 families in our country have had a death in the family. Over 4 million people have been infected by this virus. We must defeat the virus if we're going to open our economy and open our schools. In the meantime, children are food insecure. Millions of children are hungry. Many people cannot pay their rent, some of them single moms. Families are going to have their unemployment insurance expire. And what are the Republicans? 10 weeks ago, 2.5 months ago, we passed a bill, the HEROES Act, to improve that situation. The Republicans said then they need a pause. Now they still have not produced anything. We'll see this afternoon what they come up with. But what they describe it as is piecemeal. You can't. People are hungry. They need rent. They need unemployment insurance. Our state and local governments need the assistance that they deserve and need because of coronavirus. Again, testing. The president said he's going to do everything he can not to have testing in the bill. How about that? I mean, what did they say in the White House? Don't let science stand in the way of sending our kids to school. What is this? So anyway, let's just find our common ground. This morning, I issued a challenge to the administration. I said within a half an hour of their putting forth their proposal, I want to see them in the Speaker's office with Chuck Schumer there as well, so that we can compare our bills and see. And I think it will be a contrast, but nonetheless, to see where we can find our common ground. Again, how can you say, let's have trickle down? Let's have trickle down when people are hungry and again, food uncertain, rent uncertain, no money in their pockets. Our bill, the HEROES Act, it honors our heroes, state and local government, teachers, healthcare workers, food suppliers, sanitation workers, transportation workers, and the rest. Attacks the virus, testing, tracing, treating, distancing, therefore opening our economy. And third, puts money in the pockets of the American people, not by trickle down, but by bubble up.
I just want to understand where things stand right now and where you're willing to go. They have proposed $200 a week. You are holding at $600 a week. Do you see a compromise, or are you going to hold the line?
Well, let's just put it this way. I just leave it up to the American people. There are trillions of dollars being used now by the Fed and our government to bolster the stock market. Stock market's in good shape, right? And that may be a good idea. Why can't we spend trillions of dollars to bolster the middle class? So when they talk about what they're talking about, we're like, why are you quibbling over $600 when people need that to buy food, pay the rent? And again, inject demand into the economy by spending that money, inject demand, create jobs. Mm-hmm. When they fire these state and local government employees, they're going on unemployment insurance. So where is the savings in all of that? We are at a place, there is a big difference between trickle down and bubble up. And the difference between the two parties in this is drastic. Let's put that all aside and see if we can't find our common ground in this emergency. But let us do so respecting science, respecting meeting the needs of the American people, and understanding that our economy grows when we have consumer confidence, not when we just say, let's just bolster the top end, but not worry about the middle class.
It is Tuesday, the 28th of July of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small dash, a mere scant pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Be careful. It goes a long way. Yes, just really a small scant dash. It's barely measurable. But if you put a little bit too much, it will overpower, and it's lovely. Just be careful now. Okay. Like on Fridays, the French 77, pretty strong in and of itself. Hot smoked Hungarian paprika, same thing. Well, it looks like Trump is out there pushing that hydro stuff so you can get it without a prescription, because it's the only way a pusher can get it out into the public, apparently. What a weirdo. And the push for hydro was taken down from Twitter. And there's a couple of, I don't know, there's one who describes himself as a disaffected liberal. What does that mean? Especially in today's new go-go world. Come on, man. Anyway, he was concerned that Twitter took down a tweet from Trump, the president, he called him. We don't use the P word here with Trump. It's just, it's I don't know. It's sticky. It kind of stinks. Ooh, ick. Anyway, he called him the president. Why did Twitter take down a tweet by the president quoting doctors? Does Twitter know more than these doctors giving medical advice? Well, they weren't giving medical advice. They're giving COVID denial BS. They're quacks. And if a dimwit like Trump retweets quackery, it's not medical advice, okay? And anybody, even the President of the United States, is not above, I don't know, the law to stop disseminating quackery. This guy's already proven that he's not going to let science stand in the way of getting what he wants. He's even had his, I don't know, Baghdad Barbara up there in the press conferences saying, we're not going to let science stand in the way of opening these schools. How dare they? So he's going to push out hydro on the open market so people can just buy it over the shelf. What's that all about? I keep saying, I meant it as somewhat of a joke. That property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power, and now I'm not so sure it's a joke anymore. I think this guy's actually doing this. The less Americans alive when Vlad finally takes over, the easier it will be. We don't want some Wolverine contingent sneaking through. God, you know how hard it is to find them in the Rockies? We've already had 2 movies about it, and the first one's way better. Okay, just letting you know. And I hated it when it was out there. Now it's one of the great classic movies of all time in my pantheon of cinema. The first one. Second one, I don't know. Anyway. So it seems like the world's going to hell in a handbasket. They used to say that way before I was born, and I know. Because it's written down in letters for all of prosperity or posterity to see. Boy. It's so hard. It's hard to keep up. And you all know what that's like. Well, we do have a curated show today. Fortunately, to sort of rein us in, so to speak. Because there's a lot going on, and, if we're not careful, we don't manage this properly. You know where we're going? Yeah, to hell in a handbasket. Delivered. I wonder if Uber delivers. Or will it be DoorDash? Maybe DoorDash will deliver us to hell. I don't know. I feel sorry for the delivery driver. Would they have to wear a mask? They better. Don't want to infect hell. It would be really hellish then. Oh, which reminds me. Whenever I think of hell, I always think of Herman Cain. Can you imagine working for Herman Cain? He was in the restaurant industry. I would not have liked being in a company with a fellow like that. It was bad enough being in the companies I was. Yeah, that was one thing I learned when, you're working at what they would call, like a store, the location, which ours happened to be in the wharf at San Francisco, right across the street from the Buena Vista. Yeah, there was a little Fridays there, a prototype, much smaller than the usual Fridays that were installed around the world. But we were busy. Oh, my God. Anyway, when I got bumped up a little bit and I had to go to corporate in Texas, what a big difference. When you're working in your own little store, you're all a team. And, you have like this big rowing skull, an 8-man rowing skull, and it's supposed to symbolize teamwork. And then you go to corporate and they got like knives in frames. And you think it's because, they have the test kitchen. No, it's because they're stabbing each other in the back. And this is the one where so-and-so stabbed somebody else in the back. You can still see the blood. I'm like, wow, teamwork's really different here in this corporate world. Yee, is that what teams do in the corporate world? I don't know. I do know. I've been in many aspects of the corporate world, but it was really odd when I saw. I'm serious. There was a wall of knives in frames. Yikes. Well, that's I believe that type of business practices is endemic in the Trump world, and Herman Cain is emblematic of it quite well. In fact, the reason I'm bringing up Herman Cain and hell is that Herman Cain is still in the hospital from coronavirus. He's on oxygen. Oh, yeah, the apologists and the COVID deniers saying, it's just a little oxygen tube in his nose. He's not on, it's not treatment. Yeah, he's on a ventilator. The apologists are going, well, you can't prove it's on a ventilator. Well, I don't know. It's his official account. They said he's been in the hospital for the last 3 weeks, supposedly resting comfortably in ICU. You don't rest comfortably in ICU, please. Oh, God. So I just beggars the question, how many more from that Tulsa rally are still in the hospital? How many? So, yeah, we're living in hell. And a devil like Herman Cain has coronavirus just to prove it. It's such a hoax. This virus is such a hoax that Herman Cain's in the hospital from it on oxygen. That's something, if you're going to pull off a hoax, you got to pull out all the stops. Make sure Herman Cain is in there on oxygen so everybody will believe that your hoax is not a hoax. Yeah, just the extent that people will go to. And I'm not talking about, manufacturing the hoax. I'm talking about people going through hoops to believe the hoax. And it just proves that they are a cult. And we better take care. Because this cult now has a Praetorian Guard, an SA Gestapo. And today would be a good day to start identifying who these individual SA Gestapo people are. I know the SA Gestapo union's contract says that you can't identify these guys because then everyone would know they're SA Gestapo and it might follow them wherever they go. Yeah, damn right it would. Geez, Germany just put a 93-year-old Nazi prison guard in jail. I mean, yeah, damn right. And apparently the SA Gestapo here in America doesn't want that to happen. You mean you're going to come after us when we're in our 90s? Damn right we are. Nazi SA Gestapo effers. You made the choice, didn't you? Banality of evil. There's nothing banal about someone actively joining the military or a military construct, not to serve and protect the democracy that we call the United States of America, but to serve and protect a dictator? I thought these fellows took an oath to the Constitution. Oh, I forgot. Blackwater doesn't do that. They sign a non-disclosure agreement. That's their oath. And it ain't to the Constitution, is it? No, it's not. Of course, that's never stopped the regular, badged law enforcement. I still don't understand. You have people that went through, 4 years of university, another 2 years for a master's, and another 3 for a doctorate, or, another 3 for a doctorate in, how about constitutional history and European law? Some have become lawyers. And yet somebody who goes to a police science course at the local community college for a year, another 56 hours at a police academy, and they know more about the Constitution than the constitutional scholar. And they put the one who has 56 hours in a police academy out on the street to determine constitutional guarantees? No. They beat the crap out of someone and then determine later whether the constitutional guarantee was violated. I've always liked the idea of stopping the beating before it happens. People should know beforehand if they're going to violate a constitutional guarantee. I always hear that from libertarians. Oh, don't worry about it. They can sue later. Yeah, when they're dead, thanks. How about stopping the problem before it starts? Always reaction. That's why they're called reactionaries. It's always after the fact. You can never keep the fire from starting. The fire starts and then they whine at us because we're not hopping too fast enough to put out their fire. Okay. What's on the rest of the menu then here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Speaking of fires, wealthy donors are pouring millions into the fight over mail-in voting. And of course, the particular journalist that I chose to bring this story forward has a both-sidism attitude towards it. One side wants to assure people are able to vote. The other side is trying to assure that nobody votes, but somehow it's both sides. It works. It works in a particular political spectrum, I suppose. Days after a legal challenge by Oregon failed because of legal standing, protesters have filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration over its SA Gestapo tactics in Portland. And it looks like 5 other cities are doing the same, except those are mayors. And these are apparently, now I presume that a judge somewhere is going to say, oh, well, these people who were directly impacted by the violation of constitutional guarantees don't have standing. You have to have a city do it. But they just said a city doesn't have standing to bring a legal challenge from its citizens. So now that the citizens are bringing it, they're going to say, well, you're not going through the proper channels. And Bill Barr's opening salvo at Congress is a mendacious and fraudulent piece of gaslighting perjury. He's testifying right now, but we got the opening statement. And we'll catch up after the show's over. Sorry that we're right in the midst of it, but it's the way it goes, isn't it? After the break, we then move to the chef's table where former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak was found guilty on all 7 corruption charges in the multi-billion-dollar state fund scandal. And after Trump's call with Vlad, Russia scrambled a Su-27 fighter jet to intercept a U.S. surveillance plane over the Black Sea. Coincidence? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Though I must warn everyone that Netroots Nation is happening in the virtual world, and Kelly and Ricky will be on Press Row, Radio Row, virtually, so look for that. And also, Kelly's going to be tied up a bit working for the census. Can I divulge that? Well, she's working, okay, for a civic issue that we all need. Is even in the Constitution, and we thank Kelly for being so industrious in doing that. Thank you, Kelly. If you would then take a look to the leftish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, look to the leftish from that chat room link, you will notice the link to our Patreon site, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Though the bulk of what we do here comes out of our own wallets, we would be unable to do this without you. And there have been some who have been helping us for quite a while, and we're going on 10 years now of continuous 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio. Because we have a duty, and we take it seriously, and we are fulfilling it. And we'll continue to do so because of your generosity, and thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam on Twitter, and go ahead, follow me there. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media for people's social media pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, Tune, and iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Is it still iTunes? Yeah, I wondered yesterday. People are calling it Apple Podcasts all the time, or they're the same, right? iTunes, Apple Podcasts. Wherever you can find podcasts, you're going to find West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as well as some of the other Netroots Radio shows. Indeed. Plus every other podcast in the world. You'll find them. They're all there. Okay. Let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast cookbook at Speakeasy. It's out of the Associated Press by Brian Slodisco and Thomas Beaumont. Deep-pocketed and often anonymous donors are pouring over $100 million into an intensifying dispute over whether it should be easier to vote by mail, a fight that could determine Trump's fate in the November election. Remember back in the day when mail-in voting, absentee voting was the domain of the right wing because they were rich enough to be able to have a vacation during the time when, you're supposed to get your ballot in. Remember those days? Apparently, since there's been many states, my state of Oregon included, who have had mail-in balloting for about 25 years now, apparently that scares a lot of people. You mean regular people could just mail it in? Wait, no, we can't. More people are going to vote? That's not our prime directive, is it? No, it's not their prime directive. In the battleground of Wisconsin, cash-strapped cities have received $6.3 million from an organization with ties to left-wing philanthropy to help expand vote by mail. You know what's weird? Is that here's the both sidisms of it. Then they follow that up. Meanwhile, a well-funded conservative group, best known for its focus on judicial appointments, is spending heavily to fight cases related to mail-in balloting procedures. Yeah, they're taking that to court. Now, let's look at this both sidisms. In the first paragraph, in the first sentence, our industrious and intrepid reporters report that deep-pocketed and often anonymous donors are pouring $100 million into this campaign. Both sides. Now, when they say often anonymous, what they mean is that the liberals are completely transparent with who are donating money into their PACs, super PACs, or whatever. And the Republicans and the right wing have gone through great lengths, even to the extent of packing the courts with Federalist Society judges so that they will never have to divulge who their donors are, because then everybody would know. The massive effort by political parties, super PACs, and other organizations to fight over whether Americans can vote by mail is remarkable, considering the practice has long been non-controversial. Well, washing your hands, wearing a mask, socially distancing during a pandemic, that was always non-controversial too, until it wasn't. When it was deemed a possibility of impacting the re-election of one Donald J. Trump. Magical positive thinking can only get you so far. He had this magical positive thinking that just by saying he was going to throw out the first pitch at a Yankee game, it was going to happen. Well, like a virus that's killing people to the tune of, what is it now? Almost 150,000? Over 4 million infected? Reality has a really tragic way of bumping right up against magical thinking. Gene Johnson of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, Trump is calling moms anarchists, dads anarchists, veterans anarchists. Anybody who protests against Trump and is going to vote against him is a terrorist. And I believe that Bill Barr will make that so, because he does have an OLC memo that says you got to do it. Anyway, Back to this story. Days after a legal effort by the state of Oregon failed because of legal standing, a state and government entity can't bring a court case for its citizens. They don't have legal standing. We in a representative democracy, we vote to have our representatives represent us, but apparently they don't have legal standing to represent us. The nonprofit Protect Democracy filed the lawsuit in federal court in Washington, D.C. on behalf of several individual protesters, as well as the anti-racist organization Don't Shoot Portland and Wall of Moms, a group of mothers who have sought to insert themselves between protesters and police despite being blasted with tear gas and live rounds of munitions. You're not going to convince me those are less than lethal rounds. They don't bounce on the ground before they hit these moms in the head. Please. The complaint argues that while federal law allows federal officers to protect federal property, the heavily militarized agents who have responded in Portland have gone far beyond simply protecting property. Instead, it said, they have repeatedly fired tear gas, rubber bullets, and flash-bang grenades at the crowds in an effort to quell the protests in violation of the Constitution. The intent of this administration's deployment of federal agents in Portland appears to be to stifle speech the president does not like. It's true. He thinks that it should be illegal to say something bad against him. During a pandemic, who does he think he is, Woodrow Wilson? It's important to check this unlawful administration policy now before it is allowed to spread to other cities across the U.S. The complaint accuses Trump of trying to create a federal domestic police force. Trump announced he will also send federal agents to Chicago and Albuquerque, New Mexico to fight rising crime, despite objections from leaders there. Cody Fenwick from Alternate brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Attorney General Bill Barr is finally testifying before the House of Representatives after delaying for more than a year, and he's opening with a bang. Ahead of his hearing today, Politico published a copy of his opening statement. It's mendacious, hypocritical, aggressive, and inflammatory. He's not going to Congress to make friends or mollify his critics. He's going to spit fire. Now, here are 5 key takeaways from his testimony. 1. Despite being one of the most openly partisan attorneys general in recent history, Barr pledges to keep the Justice Department nonpartisan. He wrote, "We are in a time when the political discourse in Washington often reflects the politically divided nation in which we live, and too often drives that divide even deeper. Political rhetoric is inherent in our democratic system, and politics is to be expected by politicians, especially in an election year. While that may be appropriate here on Capitol Hill or on cable news, it is not acceptable at the Department of Justice. At the department, decisions must be made with no regard to political pressure from either end of Pennsylvania, or from the media or mobs." Mobs? You mean U.S. citizens redressing their government? Who are you, Torquemando? Yes, he is. 2. In the paragraph, after pledging to avoid political rhetoric, he launches a strident attack on the Russia investigation and Democrats.
Ever since I made it clear that I was going to do everything I could to get to the bottom of the grave abuses involved in the bogus Russiagate scandal, many of the Democrats on this committee have attempted to discredit me by conjuring up a narrative that I am simply the president's factotum, who disposes of criminal cases according to his instructions. Judging from the letter inviting me to this hearing, that appears to be your agenda today.
Oh, he's simply the president's factotum? He refuses to believe he's simply the president's factotum? Well, it's not simple. It's very complex. Now, it's hard to imagine how one can write those two paragraphs in succession and not see the glaring irony, but apparently Barr is so steeped in his own warped view of the world that he can't imagine or just doesn't care how his words will seem to outsiders. They live in a bubble. Now, number 3. He brazenly lies and says the president plays an appropriate role in Justice Department matters. From my experience, the president has played a role properly and traditionally played by presidents like his predecessors. Trump and his National Security Council have appropriately weighed in on law enforcement decisions that directly implicate national security or foreign policy, because those decisions necessarily involve considerations that transcend typical prosecutorial factors. Now, Fenwick says this is total and absolute nonsense. Anyone paying attention knows that Barr's predecessor, Jeff Sessions, was fired by Trump precisely because he refused to improperly intervene in a criminal investigation on his behalf. The events leading up to Barr's appointments are documented in detail in the Mueller report. Now, that's Barr's appointment as Attorney General, by the way, which completely obliterates the Attorney General's claim. This inevitably puts pressure on Barr, whether he acknowledges or not, to stay in line. And Trump continues to openly comment on and call for specific outcomes in federal criminal matters on social media and in remarks to reporters, often for clearly banal reasons. It is so frequent and so bad that Barr himself has publicly complained about it before, but he wants to gaslight you now to make it seem like it never happened. And now, number 4. He claims all his decisions are entirely nonpartisan. When asked to consider returning, I did so because I revere the department and believe my independence would allow me to help steer her back to her core mission of applying one standard of justice for everyone and enforcing the law even-handedly without partisan considerations. Since returning to the department, I have done precisely that. Even as he's engaging in fiery partisan rhetoric and blatantly lying on Trump's behalf, Barr paints himself as the last bastion of nonpartisanship in Washington, whether or not he actually believes this to be true, and it's clearly not. And it's shameful that he can't admit it. He indulges in belligerent screeds against secularists, and he blames left-wing radicals for violence while ignoring right-wing extremists. And let me just interject here quickly. The Anti-Defamation League took not a survey, but did some research. And every single political violent act that resulted in a death was by the right wing in the last 25 years. No deaths by Antifa. No liberal organization has ever done anything that resulted in a death. And in many cases, not even injuries. Unless you want to call the liberal organizations getting their heads cracked open by cops injuries because of a political event. Before he was appointed Attorney General, he had already dismissed the basis of the Russia investigation while declaring that there was more justification to investigate Hillary. He cheered James Comey's decision to announce the reopening of the Clinton email investigation days before the 2016 election, and then he turned around and cheered Trump's firing of Comey in 2017, which was justified on the grounds of Comey's treatment of Clinton. Now, number 5. Barr insisted lawmakers should condemn the protester violence in Portland while making no mention of the extensive abuses of law enforcement in response to the protests. And let's be clear about this. These protests are about police brutality, and from the get-go, the response from this administration is more brutality. Well, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? But did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. That was the day that flames burnt in the U.S. Capitol. The U.S. Armed Forces set fire to a shanty town of unemployed World War I veterans. The veterans had come to the Capitol to demand the bonus that they had been promised for their service. The payment was not due until 1945, but the nation was in the throes of the Great Depression. Desperate veterans demanded the bonus be paid early. Walter W. Walters, a veteran and unemployed former cannery worker, called for his fellow veterans to go to Washington, D.C. and demand payment. From across the country, veterans answered the call. Many hopped trains to make their way to the nation's capital. They called themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force. This echoed the American Expeditionary Force, the name for U.S. troops that had fought in France during World War I. In May, the veterans began to arrive in Washington, D.C. They set up tents and shelters in vacant lots and open spaces. The largest encampment was along the Anacostia River. Some in Washington began to warn that the 8,000 protesters of the Bonus Army were led by communists. But retired Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler came to the camp to encourage the protesters. He said,
I never saw such fine Americanism as is exhibited by you people. You have just as much right to have a lobby here as any steel corporation. Makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No.
But Army Chief of Staff General MacArthur was less sympathetic. He ordered troops to clear out the veterans. With cavalry, tanks, rifles, and tear gas, they ousted the protesters and burnt the Anacostia River encampment to the ground.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
After a 14-month delay, Attorney General William Barr finally appears before the House Judiciary Committee on Tuesday. Democrats first tried to get Barr's testimony in May of 2019 upon the release of the Mueller report. Chairman Gerald Nadler finally threatened to subpoena Barr last month before the two sides agreed to the Tuesday hearing. Barr's opening statement is in line with the stance he's taken since becoming Attorney General. For example, he says, quote, "Ever since I made it clear that I was going to do everything I could to get to the bottom of the grave abuses involved in the bogus Russiagate scandal, many of the Democrats on this committee have attempted to discredit me by conjuring up a narrative that I am simply the president's factotum who disposes of criminal cases according to his instructions. Judging from the letter inviting me to this hearing, that appears to be your agenda today." Oh, please. Democrats do plan to push Barr on his intervention into the prosecutions of two of Trump's allies, his move last month to oust a prominent and powerful U.S. attorney, and Barr's threats to state and local officials over their handling of the coronavirus. You can also expect Barr to face questions on his role in the administration's crackdown on protests across the country that followed George Floyd's killing in May, including the decision to forcibly disperse a peaceful demonstration at Lafayette Square in June and the dispatching of federal officers to Portland, where there have been clashes between protesters and authorities every night outside a complex of federal buildings. Get the popcorn ready. So speaking of Portland, a group of protesters on Monday filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration over its use of force during the nightly protests there. The plaintiffs include Black Lives Matter protesters and the Wall of Moms group that stands between the protesters and the alleged federal law enforcement officers during these nightly protests. They accuse the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Federal Protective Service of violating their constitutional rights, including free speech and the right to assembly, by firing tear gas, rubber bullets, beanbags, and pepper spray at them. But wait, there's more. The mayors of 6 U.S. cities have urgently appealed to Congress to make it illegal for the U.S. government to deploy militarized agents to cities that don't want them. The mayors of Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Chicago, Kansas City, Albuquerque, and Washington wrote to the leaders of the U.S. House and Senate pushing for limits on agent deployments. This, as a top official said, federal militarized officers would remain in Portland until attacks on the U.S. courthouse cease. Most of the people participating in the daily demonstrations have been peaceful. As happens, there are a few isolated incidents of some pelting officers with objects and trying to tear down fencing protecting the courthouse. But again, I repeat, the majority of the protests and protesters have been peaceful. Well, it may be a few weeks late and a few $1 trillion short, but the Senate Republicans formally unveiled their latest stimulus proposal. They call it the HEALS Act, which stands for Health, Economic Assistance, Liability Protection, and Schools, all of which they say they've addressed in the bill. The proposal does include a big cut in unemployment benefits. Payments would be cut down from $600 a week to $200 a week for the next couple of months, followed by another program that allegedly will replace 70% of lost wages for the rest of the year. The HEALS Act also features $1.75 billion for the design and construction of a new FBI headquarters. Republican legislators say that was a request directly from the president, and some of them reportedly are not on board with its inclusion in the bill. Senator Bernie Sanders pulled no punches when asked about the Republicans' long-awaited plan.
Pathetic would be too mild a word. They are now giving 100% deduction for rich people to go out and have 3 martini lunches. But you know what? Millions of families in this country are facing hunger. There's not an additional nickel in their package for nutrition programs for children or for working people. Not a nickel in their proposal for elections. Not a nickel for the postal service. So what you are seeing is, I think, their priorities are coming out pretty clearly. In addition to the 100% deduction for lunches and entertainment, they also have some $30 billion into the Pentagon on top of the $740 billion bill that was passed last week. So bottom line here is obviously Democrats in the Senate have got to remain strong. We've got to make absolutely clear that workers in this country continue to receive that $600. In my view, $1,200 per person is not enough. We should go up to $2,000. And by the way, we should guarantee health care for all people during this terrible crisis when so many people are worried about the pandemic.
National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien has tested positive for the coronavirus. O'Brien is the highest-ranking White House official and the closest to the president known to be infected. He reportedly has been working from home since late last week after contracting the virus following a family event. And reasonable minds want to know, Why is this a thing?
The mask debate.
CVS, Target, and Walgreens are getting in on the mask debate.
The mask debate now taking center stage at local restaurants.
There's new video of a raging mask debate.
The mask debate in Georgia is getting ugly.
The great mask debate in West Virginia might soon be coming to an end.
This mask debate is far from over.
Thank you, John Oliver. It's the mask debate. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms go to court on Tuesday to settle who has the power to order Georgians to wear face masks during a public health crisis. Mayor Lance Bottoms put a mask order in place for Atlanta. The governor, Brian Kemp, overruled her and said no masks are necessary, while cases surge in that state. Stay tuned. The body of the late John Lewis is now lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. He is the first black lawmaker to have this honor bestowed. Most lawmakers paid their respects on Monday, but when asked by a reporter if he'll do the same, Donald Trump, who will never be the bigger person, responded,
"No, I won't be going, no."
For shame. And finally, about that play ball pronouncement, maybe not so fast. Major League Baseball announced that games scheduled for Monday night were being postponed after more than a dozen Miami Marlins players and staffers tested positive for the coronavirus. The outbreak left the team stuck in Philadelphia, preventing them from getting back to Florida to play their home opener against Baltimore. That made it impossible for the New York Yankees to play their scheduled game in Philadelphia. The league announced the postponements 8 hours before the first pitches were supposed to be thrown. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 68 degrees, expecting to have nearly the same temperature as yesterday, which was about 101 to 103. So we have that to look forward to. And also, unfortunately, the air quality was quite bad towards the end of the day because, bad in terms of how it was. And it was so sweet and clear, and now we are smelling smoke and tasting it from the forest fires in Northern California blowing our way. Sunny conditions throughout the day, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies tonight, lows in the upper 60 with winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Sunny skies tomorrow with, temperatures about 105. Isn't that nice? With winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County of Southern Oregon have jumped from 269 to 302. So much for a fake hoax virus. Grass pollen is rated as moderate right outside the mothership. That air quality index is moderate at 59 parts per million. I don't think it's very healthy at that. And that daytime UV index is rated at 9, which is, of course, high. Very high. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.93 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity in the region is at 62%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 68 and partly cloudy. Paris is 75 and sunny. Rome is 91 and sunny with a heat advisory. Kyiv is 90 and fair. Kabul is 86 and fair. Hong Kong is 82 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 78 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55, cloudy with a fog advisory. And New York is 90 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with a heat advisory. Do take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Rosanna Latif of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Malaysia's former leader Najib Razak was found guilty of corruption and sentenced to 12 years in jail in the first trial over a multi-billion-dollar scandal at State Fund 1MDB that stretched to the Gulf states and Hollywood. In a case widely seen as a test of the nation's resolve to stamp out corruption and which could have major political implications, the High Court judge sentenced Najib to 12 years and a fine equivalent to $49 million U.S. for abuse of power. After considering all evidence in this trial, I find that the prosecution has successfully proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt, the High Court judge ruled.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Russian Defense Ministry said it had sent an Su-27 fighter plane to intercept a U.S. surveillance plane over the Black Sea that it said was approaching the Russian border. The U.S. plane, identified as a P-8 Poseidon, has changed course to move away from the Russian border, the ministry added. Oh, Trump and Vlad had a phone call. No one knows what the phone call was about. Did he, meaning Trump, tell he, meaning Vlad, that there was a spy plane spying on Russia at that very moment, and that he better do something about it, because then everybody will know what Vlad and Trump are doing? I think it's just one of those strange coincidences now. Don't you? No, I don't believe in one iota that is just a coincidence. Phone call, spy plane ran out of the Black Sea, eavesdropping on Vlad's communications. That's the President of the United States looking out for America. Still haven't heard anything about bounties on our soldiers' heads. And we will never hear about it from this president. We're going to hope that we don't look backwards. And we do have a truth and reconciliation. And we'll reconcile after they've served their prison terms. Indeed. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on. And we'll meet up tomorrow. You got it, for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. It's a really lovely egg dish with an equally lovely and velvety hollandaise sauce. Stop thinking bad thoughts. Anyway, we'll meet up then. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.